Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today's video is going to be talking about something that I noticed on the 1.0.2 test server technical characteristics list, and that is that Wargaming had put in a vehicle called the T-34 Shielded. Now when I went on the test server, one of the ways to see if they've actually added tanks to the game files that are not for public release but only for super testers is to add a vehicle to the comparison and then go to the compare list and then add a specific vehicle. And here I guess the T-34 is going to be Soviet, and because it's got a dash it's going to be a medium, or should I say because it's a dash it's the Soviet version. I'm not looking for a tier 8 American, I guess, T-34 with some kind of riot shield on it. And let's take a look at tier 5, and there we go, the T-34S, or I guess the T-34 Shielded. Next, if you right click on the tank, you can actually preview the vehicle, and then wham, here is the T-34 Shielded that Wargaming are talking about on the homepage, but otherwise you couldn't really take a look at in the garage. Now all in all, this vehicle, it doesn't really look all that exciting. As let's do a little bit of a comparison between the two vehicles. Now the T-34 is famous for an incredible 57mm with absolutely outrageous damage per minute. And that is 2,313, that is higher than a lot of tier 10 light tanks, for example. Now the T-34S, on the other hand, has a larger caliber gun. It does 110 damage instead, but its rate of fire is massively less, and so that means that its DPM is basically a third off what the standard T-34 is capable of. Now it's still got some great gun depression, but unlike the standard T-34, it's very inaccurate at 0.43, and while it does seem to have some armor, I guess we're just not really going to be able to see what this kind of spaced turret is capable of, or what the spacing over the side of the hull is capable of here. Maybe this thing is going to be very heavily armored for tier 5, but at least when we're looking at the raw statistics of the vehicle, it's got 10 meters less view range, it's less mobile, and there's no doubt that it has a worse gun. And so usually I wouldn't really be bothered to make an entire video on just a few statistics that we have that are currently subject to testing, and of course are very likely to change before we actually manage to get our hands on it for a public release. However, there was one thing that really tantalized me, ladies and gentlemen, and that is this little blurb down here. Unique vehicle is a reward for specific game events. And so this got me pretty excited because it's the exact same thing that Wargaming says, for example, with the Object 260, which was the original stage 4 reward from the personal set of missions. Now that I was intrigued, I had to dig a little bit deeper, and I found out that during an interview in February, the World of Tanks, I think, publishing director Anton Pankov stated that the next set of personal missions are likely to be scheduled for October. And so while this by no means confirms that the T-34 Shielded is likely to be one of the reward vehicles, it is starting to look like it might be a distinct possibility. One trend with Wargaming recently is that they've been publishing a lot of their big news on their homepage or alternatively directly on the forums, and then there's whole new super test news section which has been up since the start of this year on the European forums, and there's a couple of tanks here that are actually very interesting indeed. Firstly, there is this absolutely bizarre vehicle called the Excalibur. This is a tier 6 British tank destroyer with a semi-traversable 180 degrees turret. And ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you this tank is going to be like Marmite. You're either going to hate it or you're going to love it, or maybe it's the kind of tank that only a mother could love. Oh my word. Would you look at this silly looking tank? Now one of the interesting things about the Excalibur is they're actually testing out this tank with two different guns. Firstly, looks like a high explosive derp gun with 450 alpha damage at tier 6 with 70mm of penetration. That sounds very scary indeed. Or alternatively, with what looks like a standard British 17 pounder with 165mm of standard penetration, 150 alpha damage. That looks a lot like the Sherman Firefly, for example, which is currently a medium tank. So apart from that, what do you really have to look forward to with the Excalibur? And remember, as it says in the top right, these statistics are subject to change. Well, hit points, no. Armor, no. Power to weight, oh, that's pretty okay. And considering this vehicle can go at 50, obviously it's hard to say how big this tank is going to be, but considering that's a track width, that's like the width of a path in World of Tanks, this is not going to be a tiny vehicle. And considering it's so big and boxy, I expect the artillery are going to have their wicked way with this tank fairly reliably. But then again, with 10 degrees of gun depression, 20 degrees of elevation, and that traversable turret 90 degrees to the right and 90 degrees to the left, this thing could be pretty monstrous if you do manage to set up binoculars and work a ridgeline. And furthermore, with this 17 pounder, it's got great accuracy and very good aim time. It's going to be such a bizarre tank. But when we compare the Excalibur to the Firefly, for example, it just doesn't really seem to look like it's all that impressive. It has significantly less penetration on both its standard rounds and its premium rounds. And while its accuracy and its aim time are clearly better, do you really want to have this gigantic hull of a tank? But then again, thinking about it, you do have only 6 degrees of gun depression in the Firefly. Maybe having those 10 degrees in the Excalibur, and I guess one of the appeals of this tank is that you're going to be able to drive around in the Excalibur, right? Is this going to be the new target tier 6? I sincerely hope so. And do you know what? I really don't mind tanks going into the game like this because, yeah, one-shots or just a very big juicy targets for pretty much anything. And if the thing is as fat as it looks like, I'm sure its camo rating is going to be horrible. And I guess the only thing we've really got to watch out for is if Wargaming decide to give it that horrible high explosive gun, because the last thing that I really want to have is more KV2s or Type 5 heavies in the game. And so once again, I'm not sure whether this vehicle is going to be a possible personal reward mission, because that's what I've constantly been thinking about. Which vehicles could it possibly be that we have to look forward to? There are lots of tier 10s that Wargaming have never released, at least on the European server and the Russian server. For example, the Object 777 version 2, the Object 268 version 5. Something that I really don't think would happen, the WT Alpha E100 as a premium tank at tier 10. Oh, God forbid that we will one day get the Chieftain on PC. But if the last set of personal missions were anything to go by, there was a tier 5, a tier 7, and a tier 9. Well, possibly the T-34 Shielded will be at tier 5, maybe the Excalibur will be at tier 6. And then just yesterday, on the same forum, the Super Test News Forum, Wargaming announced that there would be a tier 8 British medium tank with an awesome gun that would be entering the super test. And this is the Chimera, which on first impressions to me looks just like something like a charioteer or a charioteer on a centurion. So what's interesting about this vehicle? Well, holy mother of alpha damage. This is a medium tank, a tier 8 medium tank with 490 alpha. Combine this with some reasonable frontal turret armor of 203 millimeters, 10 degrees of gun depression, and while not the best aim time and accuracy, definitely not bad for such a high alpha damage gun. This thing's starting to look quite promising. Now, Wargaming's Delra, who announced this, goes into detail to say that basically they're going to be looking at balancing the vehicle in the upcoming super test, but they intend to keep its signature high alpha damage. Is this going to be another Scorpion at tier 8? Well, we'll certainly have to wait and see. And once again, while I have no idea what Wargaming intends to do with this tank, it just seems so weird for me for them to add the Chimera in. When they've got the Centurion 5-1, they've got so many tier 8 British premium vehicles, which it looks like they're going to do something with. Could this be the third reward vehicle that we're seeing here? I'm not so sure, and I think the thing that's really going to let down this tank, if the statistics do stay as they are, is the penetration. 202 on its standard rounds. It's going to be a lot like a Revelarice, for example. And for me personally, that is not a bad thing. And just to give a bit of a comparison, this tank's actually looking like it might be a little bit too powerful, at least compared to the Revelarice, but remember, everything's subject to change, super early days yet, as it has just more armor, a better power to weight, but slightly less view range. It's faster forwards, backwards, it has more penetration across all of its shells, higher damage across all of its shells, a slightly worse aim time, but significantly higher damage per minute. But the Chimera definitely one to keep an eye on, and I'm just hoping that it might be one of the 4 possible, as yet unannounced reward vehicles coming to the game, possibly around October with a new set of personal missions. But also I just realized, why would Wargaming keep the current 4 tank and 4 sets of missions at the different tiers? There might be even more tiers for all I know. But I guess we're just going to have to wait to see what Wargaming have planned for these 3 vehicles that I talked about today. Anyway, ladies and gents, that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed the video. Maybe you just found it exciting to see what might be possibly coming. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, but if you hated it, give it a thumbs down, and let me know in the comments what you think about these 3 tanks. Are any of them really catching your eye as one to look out for? And do you think that any or all of them are likely to be personal mission tanks in the future series coming in October? Oh, and also, just before I go, I'd like to give a massive thank you to all of you who did check out the video that I posted yesterday on Thrones of Britannia. Just your feedback is so useful and incredible. I literally read every single one of those comments, and it just makes me really proud to have such an open and awesome community. I'm blooming lucky. And so, as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.